Dudleytown, Connecticut, once just a quiet patch of land carved out by early settlers, now swallowed whole by silence. They say it started with a family, a curse whispered on the gallows back in England, carried like a sickness across the sea. But it didn't just follow them. You see, it buried itself into the ground, right into the very dirt. We're talking about madness, death, and folks vanishing without a trace. Locals gave it a name, the Village of the Damned. But here's the part that nobody talks about. What if the stories don't even scratch the surface? What if the real horror is something they were never meant to find? Tonight we're heading somewhere that you won't find on most maps. And perhaps that's on purpose. A place where the trees, they overgrow the roads, where birds don't sing, and where something, well, just ain't right. Some say it's cursed, dragged over by the old world by a bloodline that should have stayed buried. Others, they just chalk it up to fear and folklore, twist it over time into something darker than the truth. But I'll tell you this much, the stories, they don't start in the dark. They become the dark. So tonight we're digging in. We're going to follow the trail through history, sift through the eyewitness accounts, and ask the question that nobody wants to answer. What really happened in Dudleytown? And if you think it's just a spooky campfire tale, just wait. Because once you cross into Dudleytown, something starts watching. Let's retrace the echoes, if you dare. Now, to understand Dudleytown, you got to go all the way back. And I'm not talking about the woods of Connecticut. I'm talking about all the way back across the ocean, back to the blood-soaked halls of England's royal court. Now, this all starts with a man. His name? Edmund Dudley. The man had power, he had pull, but more than anything, he had ambition, the kind that what can get you killed. You see, Edmund, he played politics with the wrong people, accused of conspiring against King Henry VIII. And back then, that kind of accusation, it doesn't end with just a slap on the wrist. He lost his head on the gallows. But before the blade dropped, or maybe right after, it depends on who's telling the story, a curse was shouted from the crowd, not just for him, but on his entire bloodline. Misery, madness, and misfortune. A legacy soaked in bad luck. Now, his son, John Dudley, he didn't learn from his daddy's mistakes. He climbed even higher. In fact, he became Duke of Northumberland. And when young King Edward VI died suddenly, John made his move. He married his son Guilford off to Lady Jane Grey. He was hoping to control the crown without wearing it. But you see, power grabs like that, they never end well. Jane ruled England for a whopping 9 days, and then the axe fell again. John Dudley, Guilford Dudley, both executed. Their dreams of royalty snuffed out like candles in the wind. And that curse, it just kept on echoing. You see, here's where things kind of shift. See, some of the Dudleys, they escaped. They slipped away from England's carnage and went across the Atlantic. They were looking for peace, or maybe just a clean slate. One of those men was William Dudley. And you see, as for him and his descendants, they didn't settle in the city or some nice stretch of farmland. They went into the woods, into the deep, dark hills of Connecticut. And you see, that's where the whispers started. Now, maybe they thought that they could outrun it, that the salt water and the fresh soil could wash away the past. But you see, curses, they don't care about distance. They don't lose strength. They wait. And maybe, just maybe, this place was waiting too, because it wasn't very long before the name Dudley would turn up again. It was 1745 when a man named Thomas Griffiths bought himself a little slice of land. We're talking about way out in the Appalachian foothills of Connecticut. It was remote, wild. It was quiet, perhaps too quiet. He wasn't alone for very long. See, the Dudley brothers, they showed up not long after. Abiel, Barzillai, Gideon, and Martin. They was all chasing the same dream that so many others had chased back then. A new beginning, fresh dirt, clean slate. They wanted to build it from the ground up. But you see, that dream, It didn't last. The land was stubborn. The soil, it was rocky and cold, and the trees, they grew thick, tight, almost like it was trying to choke off the very sky above it. You see, the deeper into those woods you went, the heavier the air got. Birds, you didn't hear them. Deers and rabbits, anything with legs, it was completely gone. Just a silence that would wrap around the place like a wet blanket. And that silence, it felt wrong. Now, the locals, they would end up calling this area the Dark Entry Forest, and for good reason. I mean, it wasn't just dark in there. It felt like it was always watching. Now, some folks, they said it was just frontier life, rough land, bad luck, long winters. But others, they say the curse followed them. It followed them right across the ocean. It sank into the roots, and it waited. And the settlers, they had no clue. They was already trapped, wrapped in something they couldn't see, something they couldn't explain. What started in blood was just beginning to bloom in the very soil of Dudleytown. When things start going wrong in a place like this, it doesn't happen all at once. Darkness seems to seep in kind of slow, like a draft through a cracked window that you didn't even know was open. And one of the first to feel it was Abiel Dudley. Now, he was a strong man, quiet, kind of kept to himself mostly, but people, they respected him. Said he had a good head on his shoulders, a steady hand, but something about Dudleytown, it got to him. At first, it was just the little things. He would stop mid-sentence and he would just listen, like there was something that only he could hear. Said there was whispers in the woods, voices riding in the wind. Too soft for most folks, but he heard them loud and clear. Then came the shadows, not like nightfall. These were different. He said he watched them go from tree line to tree line to tree line, stood just out of sight, kind of slipping back into the dark every time he would turn to face him. Neighbors started noticing that he wasn't quite right. His talk got kind of strange, like he was paranoid, frantic. He warned people, don't go past the ridge after sundown. They're waiting for you out there. Folks tried to be kind at first, but then the debts, they started piling up. See, he stopped farming, stopped fixing things in his house. It became something that people would cross the road just to avoid. See, there was sounds that people would hear. Laughter. Laughter when there was no one there. They would hear crying. And once, somebody claimed they heard a full conversation. Abiel's voice, clear as day, talking to someone who never answered back. And in the end, they ended up calling him insane. They locked him away. And when he died, he was in complete poverty, alone and afraid. No one touched it. He just sat there, rotting in the woods like a tombstone. And the folks, they started thinking to themselves, was Abiel just a man whose mind had betrayed him? Or perhaps was he just the first one to really see what was hiding in those trees? Abiel Dudley's story, it should have been a warning, but instead, it was just the first crack in the dam. Because see, the darkness in Dudleytown, it doesn't stay put. It has legs, and it follows people. I mean, that's exactly what happened to Nathaniel Carter. He felt it, the weight, the sickness in the land. So he packed up his family and he left. He left Dudleytown far behind. He headed up north. He wanted to go way up near Binghamton, New York. To him, the distance, it would buy him a little bit of peace. He could start over, clean slate, same old song and dance that we hear time and time again in all these stories. But whatever it was that cursed that very land, I didn't care about some line on a map. One day, Nathaniel was out hunting. He wasn't even very far from his house, and that's when it happened. A group of Native American raiders came through very fast. Too fast to be stopped. By the time Nathaniel got back, the nightmare had already happened. His wife, murdered. Their infant child was gone. Two others, just kids, still sick in bed, killed right where they laid. And Nathaniel, captured. He was scalped and left for dead. But death, it didn't take him. He survived, only to live with what he saw burning through his mind for the rest of his days. The surviving children, they were taken. The daughters came back eventually. Ransom was paid, but they were never the same. And his son David, well, David was raised by the very people that took him. And somehow, against all odds, he survived it all. He lived on and became a judge, a very respected man, but the family was shattered and they was scattered. And folks started to talk. They started to ask questions, see things they didn't make sense. They started thinking to themselves, did Nathaniel Carter just run into some bad luck out in the frontier? Or did he bring something back with him? Because by now, people were starting to see a pattern. We talk about a pattern whenever it comes to paranormal. We start looking around, we go, yep, I've seen it here, and I've seen it there, and I've seen it over here. And you start piecing it all together. And for these folks, the deeper they looked, the more it seemed like no one who ever left Dudleytown ever really left. Now, you'd hope after what happened to Nathaniel that would be just the end of it. That whatever evil had rooted itself in the family's life, it would finally let go. But you see, that's not how it works. Not in any of these stories. Because the darkness, it wasn't done with the Carters. Not far from where Nathaniel's nightmare played out, his brother, Adoniram Carter, he tried to live very quietly, kept to the very edge of Dudleytown, didn't stir up any kind of trouble, he didn't ask any kind of questions, he just wanted peace. He wanted to raise his family away from the whispers and away from the shadows. But the shadows, they found him anyway. Started small, a cough, a fever, nothing that would turn any kind of heads. But within days, the sickness tore through the entire household. Fast, it was brutal. It didn't matter if you was young or if you was old, if you were strong or if you was frail. It hit everybody. And what really shocked the folks in Dudleytown was, well, it stopped right in that very home. Stopped dead in its tracks. It didn't spread to the neighbors. It didn't drift through the town. It was like it was locked into that very home. Like something had chosen them. And once again, see, folks, they started whispering. Was it really just bad luck, some sickness brought on by the wind, or did the curse? Did it pick its next target? Because whatever it wasn't random. I mean, not anymore. After what happened to the Carter family, you couldn't help but feel like, well, something was picking people off. Now, not every haunting starts with flickering lights or whispers in the dark. I mean, sometimes it starts with just a man and a fall that no one can explain. Gershon Hollister was a good man. He was quiet, steady, hands built for hard work, not clumsy accidents. He was helping his neighbor, William Tanner, build a barn. It was nothing fancy, just honest labor under a wide blue sky. But something went terribly wrong. On a day like any other, Gershon fell from the top beam. He dropped like a sack of grain. No warning, no cry for help. Now, some said that he slipped, that it was just one of those things. It was bad footing. Maybe it was bad luck. We see others. See, they weren't so sure. The way Tanner looked afterwards, he couldn't stop glancing out into that tree line, the very tree line that we was talking about earlier. Like he saw something that the rest of them couldn't. And it made people want to start whispering, start asking themselves, was it just a fall, or did something else knock Gershon off that very top beam? Something that didn't want to be seen, but wanted to make sure that it was felt. After Gershon's fall, folks expected William Tanner to kind of be shaken. I mean, Anyone would be, right? But the way he acted, it wasn't just grief. Witnesses said that he would mutter under his breath, barely making any kind of sense. He kept glancing out into those woods like he was waiting on something. Or maybe hoping not to see it again, eyes darting, hands twitching, like he knew something had crossed the line that very day, and pretty soon word got out. Some still said it was an accident, but others, they weren't buying it. They whispered, what if Gershon didn't fall? What if something pushed him? Something hiding in the forest, something that wanted in. And while the rest of the town kind of wrestled with that very thought, William Tanner, he started to slip. He stopped talking to folks, kept to himself, shut the curtains even in the daytime. Whatever happened that day in that very barn frame, it didn't just break a man, it opened a door, and something dark was already walking inside. But it didn't hit him all at once. It started with very small occurrences. Like there'd be something that would be a flicker in the corner of his eye. You've had that happen before. I know I have. A shadow that would move right there in the corner when you know that there's nothing that should have moved. But then he started hearing little whispers. It seemed like it was pulled in from the very wind. But it didn't take very long for it to go from being small occurrences to very large. Things that you can't ignore. Tanner started seeing things. He started feeling things. He would step outside in very odd hours. He'd be barefoot, wide-eyed, muttering about things that he would see out in the very tree lines that we keep talking about. He said they were watching, waiting. They were plotting. Now neighbors, they tried to look the other way at first, but then the story started spreading. Tanner, standing out in the dark, talking to people who wasn't even there, describing faces twisted with malice, saying that they would never blink, they never move, they just watched him. And for them, they just chalked it up as just pure grief. Said the poor man cracked after what happened to Gershon. But you see, even the folks that dismissed his words, they couldn't shake the way that he said them, the way that he would look at him in the eyes. His voice low and shaking, not like a man that was looking for sympathy, but a man who knew that there was something out there, something out in those woods, something that was coming after each and every single one of them. And little by little, the fear that lived inside William Tanner, it leaked into everybody else. But by the time the folks realized what had happened to William Tanner, it was already far too late. See, whatever had gripped onto him, it wasn't letting go. And the scary part, it was also reaching out to others. And it wasn't just hitting on the weak, the lonely, and the broken. It started reaching out to the strongest of all of them. That person, General Herman Swift. Now, he was a hero of the Revolutionary War, a man who had faced bullets and bloods and loss, and he kept on marching. He served under George Washington himself, and he settled near Dudleytown with his wife Sarah, hoping to live out just his final days in just a little bit of peace. But you see, there was no peace on this cursed soil. In 1804, as a storm rolled in, Sarah stepped onto the front porch. She was just standing there when lightning struck. One bolt, 1 second. Gone. And the general? That moment shattered him unlike any other scene that he had seen on any warfield or battlefield that he was ever a part of. Neighbors said he stopped looking like himself. He started wandering around, talking to people that wasn't even there. And he said Sarah never left. That she was right there with him, but she was in the wind, in the trees, in the woods. And just like Tanner, he started to fade. Not all at once, but piece by piece, another strong soul pulled under by something that no one could explain. Now, as the days would go on, he would slip farther and farther away, started talking to the shadows, said that he would hear Sarah's voice in the breeze, whispers floating through the trees, calling his name. He swore that he could feel her, like the air itself had changed, heavy, cold. but it was familiar. The same man who had stared down cannon fire was now afraid to sleep with the lights off. Whatever haunted that land, it didn't need chains or screams, just grief and silence and the slow, steady cracking of a man's soul. Eventually, Swift, he was no longer the hero that people would remember. He was just another casualty, not of battle this time, but of something quieter, something older. But as dark and grim as that was, it wasn't the end. It wasn't even the worst of it, because what came next, it wasn't grief, it wasn't madness, it was a presence. See, something was there in the stillness, in the silence, watching, waiting, biding its time, and before long, Dudleytown would know that it was no longer alone. Well, by now, most folks that had any kind of sense, they started keeping their distance from Dudleytown, but John Brophy, he came anyways. He wasn't chasing any kind of riches or glory. He just wanted a little peace, a simple life with his family, raise some sheep, keep to himself, kind of let the world spin on without him. And for a moment, it worked. The hills were quiet, the days were long, the air felt clean, but that all lasted until it didn't. One morning he walked out to tend to his flock, and they were gone. Every single last one of them. No tracks, no blood, no signs of struggle. It was just complete silence. And then came the real heartbreak. His wife, healthy as could be, she became ill without any kind of warning, and just like that, she was gone too. Now some, they whispered that it was a sickness, but others, they said it felt off. It was too fast, too cold, too quiet, like something had taken her. Like something was working its way through the Brophy family just one piece at a time. But the worst, it was still waiting. Not long after losing his wife, Brophy's two sons, they also disappeared, just up and gone. Now some folks outside of town, they whispered about theft and said the boys, they ran off to avoid the law, but in Dudleytown, nobody believed that. They knew better. They had seen what those woods could actually do to anybody, and most figured that the boys, they didn't run. They had been taken by whatever had been creeping all those years, just out of sight, something that didn't leave any kind of footprints, but always left emptiness. Now Brophy kind of started slipping after that. He didn't go into town. When people would knock on his door, he would never answer. Now and then, someone would spot him wandering just to the very edge of the trees. He was always muttering to himself, said that the shadows whispered at night. Sounds familiar, right? Said they were watching him too. Then one night, fire lit up the sky. Folks saw the glow from miles away. It was Brophy's home, and it was completely swallowed by flames. They ran out there as fast as they could, but when they got there, no Brophy, no body, no bones, just ashes and silence. Now some say that he died in the fire. Others say that he vanished, same as his sons, dragged into the woods by something that no one could ever stop. Either way, the house didn't just burn, it ended. Like whatever haunted the Dudleytown had finally come to collect at least one more soul. Now, not every tragedy in Dudleytown left behind smoke and ashes. Some wounds, they don't bleed out loud. Take Mary Greeley. She was born near Dudleytown, grew up in those same woods, right there in her very own backyard. And maybe she carried a piece of them with her. Now, most people, they knew her husband, Horace Greeley, the newspaper man turned presidential hopeful, but Mary, she carried a much quieter weight. And as Horace's campaign picked up steam in 1872, something in her kind of began to fade. Those closest to her, they saw it, said she seemed hollow. She seemed distant. She wasn't just sad, she was sinking. Folks started whispering about Dudleytown's shadow and how it hadn't let her go, that it still clung to her, whispering things that the rest of us, we just couldn't hear. 1 week before Horace Greeley lost his bid for the presidency. When he was still hopeful, when things were starting to pick up, Mary lost her fight with the darkness, and she took her own life. And just like that, what should have been a victory for the Greeley family turned into mourning. Many say that's why Horace lost. You see, he was completely devastated, but the folks, the ones who knew where Mary came from, they weren't just grieving, they were remembering the stories, the whispers, that creeping, quiet presence that never seemed to let go of anyone who crossed paths with Dudleytown. Was Mary's death a personal tragedy? Well, absolutely. But was it also part of something bigger, something darker, something that followed her from those very hills? That question, it still hangs in the air like a cold breath. And it's not just any kind of history anymore, because Dudleytown's story, it doesn't end with the Greeleys. It didn't just get buried with the settlers or fade into legend. You see, it's still there, and the people still feel it. Now, modern day visitors to the woods, they say it doesn't feel empty. In fact, it feels aware, talking about strange lights and footsteps where there shouldn't be any, and that unmistakable feeling like you're being watched. And those reports, they all come to a head with one of the town's most unsettling modern stories, talking about Dr. William Clark and his wife Harriet, and their visit. It would remind everyone just how alive Dudleytown's darkness still is. It would renew the fears and deepen the mystery surrounding Dudleytown. Mary Greeley's death, it might have seemed like the final chapter, just another life crushed by grief. But you see, the deeper that you dig into Dudleytown, the more that you realize that the darkness, it didn't really stay buried in the past. It followed the years, it changed its face, but never stopped claiming lives. And in the early 1900s, it found another one. We're talking about Dr. William Clark, and he was no fool. He was a respected cancer specialist out of New York City. The man was educated, rational, grounded in science. He wasn't looking for no ghosts, just some peace and quiet away from the noise. He and his wife Harriet, they bought a stretch of land right near Dudleytown, and back then they called it the Dark Entry Forest. Now, the name, it probably should have been enough, but to them it looked like paradise. We're talking about rolling hills, dense trees, and not a soul in sight. At first, life was good. We're talking about quiet mornings, clean air, no city stress, but you see, the woods, they don't give peace. They pretend. It started slow with Harriet. She would glance out the window and start to linger just a little bit too long. Said she felt like they were being watched. But she never saw anyone. Said there was something in the trees, but couldn't explain what it could have been. Then one summer day, William got called back to the city just for a little while. And in the small sliver of time, everything changed. When William Clark rushed back from the city, he expected to find his wife waiting for him on the porch. Instead, he found her curled in the corner of their bedroom, eyes wide, laughing, but you see, it wasn't joy. It was all kinds of wrong, the kind of laughter that makes your skin crawl, her face twisted in panic, eyes glazed over like she had seen something that she shouldn't have. Something still in the room. She couldn't form a sentence, just fragments. She would whisper about shadowy figures out in the trees. Said they were watching her. Said that they never blinked. Now, Harriet, she never came back from whatever she saw out there. Her final days were spent locked in fear. She was trapped in her own mind, haunted by something that no one else could see. But she swore whatever it was never left. And William? I mean, all the science in the world, it couldn't help him now. He was left with silence and sorrow and questions that would never be answered. Did Harriet suffer a break with reality? Or did something in those woods finally make itself known? Now, either way, Dudleytown, it wasn't done. Not by a long shot. You'd think by now people would know better, but curiosity's a very stubborn thing. In Dudleytown, it still calls to folks. Teenagers, thrill seekers, paranormal junkies looking for a scare. They come out to those woods like it's just any other ghost story. But Dudleytown, it ain't just a story, and it doesn't play. People talk about whispers in the trees, not the wind, not animals. We're talking about voices, too soft to make out, but sharp enough to cut through your nerve. It's always low, malevolent, like something trying to crawl into your own thoughts. Others say that they see shapes, shadowy figures at the very edge of their vision, slipping behind trees that when you take a second look, you don't see them. Some feel it. One teen, he came out of there with some deep scratches across his back, said something with glowing red eyes. It'd come out of nowhere. Didn't run, didn't roar, just appeared, attacked, and vanished. In the woods, dead quiet after all. Like nothing had even happened, except for those scars. And then there's the cryptid stuff. Some talk about humanoid figures watching from the tree line. They're too tall, too still. Others say they've seen beast-like things crawling where nothing should crawl. Now, whatever's out there now, it doesn't care if you believe in curses. It just waits. Because you see, in Dudleytown today, you don't walk into a haunted place. You step into something that's alive, and trust me, according to the stories it remembers. Now, all these stories, these sightings and whispers of shadowy things, you could probably chalk them up to just pure imagination. Just teenagers out chasing a legend, folks seeing things that they want to see. But what if it ain't just them? What if there was experts in the field of paranormal and even they couldn't explain it? Because in the 1970s, Ed and Lorraine Warren, they came to Dudleytown. Yep, we're talking about those Warrens. The ones behind some of the most notorious paranormal cases in all of history. And even they weren't ready for what they found. You see, they came because the rumors, they wouldn't quit. There was too many stories, too many people leaving those woods, and they would leave a little bit different than how they came in. Now, what they found wasn't ghostly. It was evil. Lorraine said that place carried a certain weight, something that was heavy and oppressive, something that was getting to her from the very moment that they arrived, almost like the ground itself. They didn't want them there. And witnesses, they told things too, stories that the locals had been too scared to say out loud. There was accounts of strange creatures. It was hoof-footed, things that would move through the trees, not animals, not men, something else entirely. And then there was the signs. When they went to inspect the woods, they would find these marked carvings in the trees, symbols, rituals. The Warrens believed that people had been messing with things that they had no business touching. We're talking about dark rituals, satanic practices, and whatever it was stirring up something that was ancient. When they left, Ed and Lorraine, they didn't shrug this one off. They didn't chalk it up to just local legend. They left convinced that Dudleytown wasn't just haunted, it was corrupted, touched by something deeper, something darker, and something that was still waiting. And they asked the same question that we're still asking to this very day. What really lives in those woods, and how long will it wait until it calls again? You'd think after everything, after the disappearances, the deaths, the madness, that folks would stay away from Dudleytown for good, but nope. If anything, the legend, it only gets louder. In fact, in recent years, it's gone from just quiet local stories whispered between neighbors to a full-blown national obsession. We're talking about videos and podcasts and paranormal investigators with night vision cameras and a death wish. Everybody wants a piece of it. And the more eyes that turn to Dudleytown, the more it seems to stare back. People report hearing voices in the trees. They say it's clear as day. They talk about shadowy figures caught in the cameras, in moments, terrifying, unexplainable moments that just don't make any kind of sense. It's not just a haunting anymore. It's a collective nightmare, feeding on fear, curiosity, and just enough truth to keep people coming back. Rumors say the land's guarded now by something secretive. Some say it's to protect the public, others say it's to keep something in. And while most folks who visit walk around very unharmed, a few, they don't walk away at all. Dudleytown's legend is not dying. It's evolving. It's getting stronger. It's feeding off every single whisper, every tale told, every video that goes viral. Every trespasser who steps into those woods thinking that it's just another spooky thrill. They say that videos is created on Dudleytown, they somehow find a way of being found by other people. It's almost like the woods of Dudleytown is trying to seek more victims. But legends like this, you see, they aren't just stories, they're warnings. Because you see, out in those trees, hidden beneath the quiet and the dark, something's still watching, still waiting, and it knows we're still looking. All right, let's get down to the meat and the potatoes. Here's the thing, and I think you're going to find it kind of interesting because not everyone believes and buys into the whole legend. In fact, there's this guy, his name is Gary Dudley. He's actually a direct descendant of the Dudley family, and he's done some pretty serious digging into the town's history. And you see, according to him, the whole cursed bloodline from England thing, it doesn't hold up. In fact, he went through all the records, the genealogy, the birth and death certificates, immigration logs, everything. And what he found is that there's no direct link between the Dudleys of Dudleytown and Edmund Dudley, the guy that was executed under King Henry VIII. So if that connection isn't real, then the curse, at least from that origin, well, kind of just all falls apart. But that's not all that Gary's saying. He also points out that a lot of the tragedies that folk bring up, the madness, the illness, the disappearances, they kind of have practical explanations. Things like mental health issues, dementia, disease that were common in rural isolated areas. I mean, we're talking about a long time ago. Medical research isn't up to the kind of standards that it is today. Even accidents, especially when you're living that far out with nobody helping nearby. And here's something else. A lot of what you know about Dudleytown's so-called haunted past, it all traces back to a 1938 article, a piece that, according to Gary, twisted a lot of the facts that would kind of make it more dramatic. Basically, that's where the legend, it really kind of starts to snowball. Now, that's the skeptical side, and it kind of makes sense, but here's the flip. Believers, they aren't really letting it go all that easy. They argue that eyewitness accounts are too consistent to just write it off. I mean, people you've never met, they've never read the same stories, they still report the same kinds of things. We're talking about voices and shadowy figures and overwhelming sense of feeling like you're being watched. And they ask the big question, if it's all fake, then why all the secrecy? Why is that area locked down so tight? Why all the restrictions, the patrols, the warnings? I mean, to them, it doesn't look like people protecting a myth. It looks like local folks hiding something real. So on one side, we've got historical facts and records and logical explanations. On the other, you've got too many people claiming that they've seen too much to ignore. And honestly, both sides have a point. Well, in the last segment, we talked about things would become interesting. Now things are about to become a little bit weird. I mean, we talked about the history, we talked about the skeptics and the believers, but some folks, they got their own ideas, the way out there stuff. Talking about fringe theories, and the one that sticks around the most is the idea of generational curses, starting all the way back to Edmund Dudley. Now, even though there's no solid evidence connecting our Dudleys to him, some people still think that whatever curse was shouted out on that gallows, it kind of stuck. not just to the family, but to the land itself. Like it crossed the ocean, followed the bloodlines, and just sat there, festering. Then there's the theory about magnetic anomalies. Some folks believe that Dudleytown, it might be sitting on some kind of weird energy spot, like an electromagnetic hotspot or a natural distortion to the Earth's field. I mean, the idea is that there's like this energy that can mess with your brain that makes you feel anxious or paranoid, and even cause, on some occasion, hallucinations. You know that feeling you get when you walk into a room and the air it feels off. You feel weird. Could that explain why people are saying they're seeing things out in the woods, why they're feeling sick or scared or feel like they're being watched when there's nothing there? I mean, it ain't a ghost, but it ain't nothing either. And then there's the really far out theory, one that, honestly, I think about more than I probably should. Some say that Dudleytown, it might be sitting on a thin spot, like the kind of place where the veil between our world and something else, it's pretty thin. An interdimensional doorway. They tie it to Native American legends, to rumors of occult rituals that supposedly happened out there, and to the idea that this land, it isn't just haunted, it's open. Open to things that we don't understand, things that shouldn't be able to cross over, but perhaps, maybe sometimes they do. Now, are any of these theories provable? Not really. But they're also not going away either. Because see, the truth is, when you've got so many questions and this many stories, people, they kind of start looking for answers wherever they can find them. And sometimes the strangest ones, well, they're the ones that stick. So now we're left here, standing right on the very edge, between what we know and what we think we know, between history and between folklore, between the woods that we can see and the ones that only exist, well, when the sun goes down. What really happened in Dudleytown? Is there something buried beneath all these stories, some dark truth that's just waiting to be uncovered? Or is it just all a legend that kind of got out of hand, twisted by fear and retold until, well, it started to kind of feel real? That's the part that always gets me, because whether you believe in curses or science or something in between, people are still seeing things, still hearing things, still feeling something when they step into those very woods. And that means that the story ain't done. So I want to hear from you. What do you think is really going on out there? You got a theory, a story, something that didn't quite sit right with you while you was listening? Drop in the comments or send it our way. Let's keep the conversation going, because sometimes the wildest ideas are the ones that's worth digging into. And just so you know, we're not going to slow down. In fact, next time we're talking about a story that plays with your head in a whole different way. Think of it. Let's take a little imaginary tour here. A woman leaves her sick mother in a hotel room during the World's Fair. Comes back a few hours later, and the hotel, it says her mother was never there. No register, not seen, not even a trace of her left behind. Was it a cover-up, a government quarantine, or something far stranger? We're going to call that series The Vanishing Hotel Room. And believe me, this one's going to mess with all your senses of reality. So until then, keep your eyes open, and remember, just because you leave the woods doesn't mean the woods leaves you. Until I see you in the next podcast or the next video, goodbye.